Florida have an election fraud problem? Have you taken a look at your electrical bills lately, specifically your FPNL, the only bill we have in South Florida for our power? Have you taken a look at that lately? Well, guess what? Brace yourself. If you haven't, get ready. They've gone up. Just like the insurance is about to go up in your household and other types of bills that we have. Here today to discuss these issues and kind of probe into what's going on in Florida is a very good friend of mine, a excellent advocate, Laura Wagner. She's a consumer policy advocate. Hi, Laura.
Hi,
Welcome.
Robert. So nice to see you this morning in person after a couple of years.
Yes, without a mask.
I know. It's wonderful.
But you know what? I still mask up. So
I do as well, especially in the grocery store, trying to stay healthy.
Yeah, you know what? That COVID has been unforgiving.
It has.
You know, so Laura, we've been talking. I just had had a conversation with Rene Garcia, which you were in the room listening to. He's the REC chair, obviously giving us his points from his perspective on the governor and the legislature and some of the key races to look out for. But I wanted to talk to you a little more, one-on-one stuff that you do. You're actually
on the consumer side.
Yeah, you're actually protecting the consumers by just staying on top of policies and trying to advocate for them. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Absolutely. We work, and that's my team and I, right, to work closely with our legislators, but our job really is to talk to consumers around the state, and we narrow in on pocketbook economic issues, and we gather that information however we can, and then we meet with legislators and sometimes also with press if it's needed, to educate people. And ultimately, and thanks to what you do, is inform our citizenry about what is going on.
I think this is a partnership, right? If we don't, we must get together to better inform people, because there's a lot of misinformation.
Well, exactly. I mean, if somebody has to represent the average citizen with our legislators versus just the corporations going and lobbying. So we lobby them on behalf of the citizenry.
Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough. So let's get started. Let's go right into the issues of. Let's talk about the price hike rates or the rate hikes with FPNL.
Okay.
What's driving that?
Largest in history. Made the news headline all of last year, right? We're in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people unemployed, lots of people drained bank accounts during that time, and FPNL decided to request a rate hike with the Public Service Commission. That was a very contentious issue last year. Thanks to other advocates, not myself though. They did protest quite a bit at the Public Service Commission hearings. We did quite a bit of work around that as well, informing citizens, asking them to send emails and make calls to those public service commissioners.
So let me stop you there for a second, because I want it for the viewers' perspective. Public Service Commission, the power utilities company have to go to them to get authorized, have authorization to increase the rate. Who are those people? Or how do they get appointed?
That is a board of people. So prior to 1978, those positions, well, let me even take you back, right? That started back with the railroad days. A long time ago. It really started with railroads.
Okay.
And then as we have progressed, that commission has taken on other sorts of infrastructure, water, our investor-owned utilities, sometimes other things around transportation, et cetera. So it's a big job. They oversee quite a bit of infrastructure within the state. But prior to 1978, those were elected positions. And in 1978, they removed that, the state legislators did. And now those are appointed positions. So there are 5 of them. They have a nominating process. So our state legislators nominate them. I believe that comes down to I think several. Okay. And then those go to the governor, and then the governor ultimately picks who sits on that Public Service Commission.
And does the governor still have authorization to remove somebody off the PSC?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to refer to the Public Service Commission as the PSC. Make it simple.
Yes.
All right. So
we love our acronyms.
Well, it makes it easier. So tell us about what's going on. So FPNL applies to the PSC for rate hike. They give it to them. Now the rates are higher than ever.
It was negotiated down. Okay. So thank God for consumer advocates. FPNL specifically went in.
Were you involved in that?
No, no. I was involved in informing citizens and asking them to reach out to PSC commissioners that they did not support the rate hike. But in the actual advocating on that, we don't. Though they're much smarter than I am. But they did negotiate it down. So FP&L, and by the way, this is not just FP&L. The other investor-owned utilities have also gone in front of the PSC and have also requested, and all of them have received them. So everybody across the board in the state is getting rate hikes. But FP&Ls in particular, they wanted $1.1 billion for this year. It was negotiated down to, I believe, $692 million. Not a small amount of money. And then next year's was also negotiated down to a little over $560 million.
Was there justification for that?
Well, they have lots of justifications, lots of very complex mathematical equations. A lot of it has to do with Turkey Point. Okay. So Turkey Point, FP&L did request from the federal government and other licensing entities to keep Turkey Point operational and extend that. That was initially approved, but then just recently, due to a lawsuit, that approval was retracted, and we've actually reduced the operational time, or like the permit is probably what most people might refer to it as, by 20 years. So it was officially should be no longer permitted to produce nuclear power in Miami-Dade after 2032. So think about it as 10 years. We have about 10 years to figure out in Miami-Dade how we are going to produce more energy.
So I know there's been a lot of talk about something called net metering and solar, right?
Yes.
And selling, consumers being able to generate power and then selling it back to the company, and then it goes to the system, the grid, and reduce the prices. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that? Because we're in Sunshine State. One would think that
we have lots of sunshine.
We have a lot of sunshine. We have a lot of, we may not have a lot of land for development in Dade County, but we have a lot of houses, a lot of rooftops.
Yes.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly. I think what I enjoy about this conversation the most, it is actually an opportunity for people to reduce their own bills. And I hate to say it, in my lifetime, there are very few bills in my life that have actually gone down. Almost everything I pay for, other than TVs, I will give credit for that. My first plasma was like $5,000.
Yeah.
So the cost of those have gone down. But if we look at our average consumerism, it goes up and up and up. This is an opportunity, thanks to technology, to actually reduce a bill. And that's phenomenal. It's amazing to me to be able to do that. But we also need our elected officials to agree that that's a good thing. And as of right now, the state legislature and the governor are not in that same viewpoint. So net metering is a very unsexy term. Sounds ridiculous, and most people don't know what it is. But to simplify it, it is the relationship that the homeowner has with the utility on energy going into their home and energy going out of their home. Okay. So it's like a mathematical equation.
So they generate the power through the sun, and then whatever they don't use,
the excess energy
goes out to.
So the average person, and I do a lot of consumer work around working people. We're not home during the day. Granted, we were all home for about 2 years, but generally speaking, right, we're not at home during peak energy production time.
Lord, let the COVID be done, please.
we all want to get out more, right? And the kids go back to school. So with that being said, your house is sitting at home producing energy, which could equate to producing money for you, right? If the formula worked out correctly. And then it would offset the costs of the time when your house is actually needing energy, which is probably early in the morning or in the nighttime hours, right? So it's like a give and take relationship on your energy usage. And that in and of itself is very controversial. It doesn't sound very controversial, but it is very controversial to those energy producing entities, which are the investment-owned utilities. Those are called IOUs, which is your FPL, Duke, TECO, and all of the other ones that are operating in the state.
So I guess that means that if you're producing energy at home, it's going to affect their bottom line. It's going to
Correct.
reduce their profits, right?
Correct.
Or the money they make.
Right.
So,
And what they're willing to pay you for that
Okay.
energy is one of the keys. So that's really what the state legislature is trying to hammer out right now. They've been attacking, and I say they, meaning just the big energy companies in Florida. And this is actually not just a Florida problem. This is across the country. We've seen quite a bit of legislation in the past couple of years around this quote unquote
Mhm.
net metering, right? The relationship of energy production and how much, if you produce it on your private property, how much you're going to get paid for that energy. And so they're trying to shrink that equation where it doesn't benefit the consumer and instead continues to benefit the company. So they want to pay you less, Robert, and then turn around and sell it to your neighbor and make a profit off of it.
so why is it that people aren't aware of this? The consumer.
It's new technology, I think, is one of the
Mhm.
things. Solar right now, the cost of putting solar panels on your roof has shrunk quite a bit. So it's really kind of at the edge where a lot of the average consumer is starting to look at it and say, maybe we can afford this. Maybe we're going to invest in our property. People are starting to talk to people who sell their homes who have solar panels on them and are starting to
Mhm.
get a return of investment on that too. It increases the value of their property. The cost of the solar panels themselves have come down significantly. A lot of those solar panels are now being produced in the United States instead of overseas.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's an incentive to a lot of people. So we're like really right on that edge of moving into a whole different economy of how do we produce power in this country. And I will tell you, there's two fantastic companies right now that are actually creating brand new products that most homeowners will enjoy probably within the next 10 years when they replace their roofs. These solar panels will not be those big giant square things that we see
Okay.
attached. It's going to look like roof tiles. So Tesla and GAF already have patents on them and have already produced them and are actually already installing them. And they're hurricane rated to 130 miles an hour. So your entire roof will be covered with solar panels and be able to produce
They'll
energy.
probably provide added protection over those tiles that serve no protection. They just
Right.
sit on the top of the roof.
Right. Other than
So-
some shade.
So, Laura, here's where, as you're talking, I'm thinking, God, we have an opportunity to save money as consumers, right?
Mhm.
Which very rarely, as you pointed out, very rarely occurs. Yet, the utility company, which we only have one utility company in South Florida, is preventing us, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes. And our legislators,
so
because that's
exactly, that's
ultimately
where I'm
who
going.
passes it.
So I'm going, who has the power to change this?
Our legislators, 100% in their hands to change it. If they said today, we want to have energy independence and we believe that property owners should be able to produce energy on their property and get paid a fair, equitable rate, I think, to me, it's good policy.
So what kind of movement is there to inspire, for lack of a better term, inspire the legislators to do just that?
Well, there's been a big battle
Uh-huh.
in Tallahassee this past year. There was a huge rally. That rally was really interestingly led not by homeowners, though, but by the industry itself. So those are good paying jobs, by the way. So
Mhm.
the solar industry in Florida, a lot of the legislators support it. There's a lot of very small installers, so small businesses. Okay, these are not run by gigantic conglomerates, right?
Mhm.
All small independent business owners. And it's a fantastic industry. I believe statistically, I think it is directly in Florida, the solar is about 40,000 jobs. And then indirectly, it's about 80,000 jobs in the state of Florida.
Wow.
So if we disincentivize them, which in my opinion, the bill that's about to pass
Mhm.
within the next couple of days will severely disincentivize homeowners. In other words, their return on investment, their ROI on it, is going to be shrunk down to a point where they're going to take out their little calculators when they're sitting down with
Yeah.
the solar installer and start crunching those numbers. And it's not going to look good.
Man, like, again, as you're talking, I'm thinking, here we are in the state. You have the governor who says that we have the most free state. He's advocating freedoms, rights, personal rights, right? And then as a homeowner, this strikes to my property rights.
Yes.
Do I have the right to do what I want to do with my property. And
Mhm.
if this case is generate power to save me money, why can't I?
I know. I agree 100%. I think it's a very unique opportunity for people to be able to do that.
Mhm.
There should always be some parameters involved with it. Do I think that local municipalities and things like that should regulate it slightly, right? We don't want the person who decides to put solar panels all over the entire house to make the entire house a solar panel house. Right? There might be some rules that we might need
Okay.
to and guardrails that we might need to put to it. But the premise of it, I think,
Uh-huh.
is what is important. And I believe that people should be able to generate revenue on their properties.
Absolutely. And I was wrong because I said that there's only one power utility company providing power to South Florida. I believe Homestead has their own utility company.
Yeah, there
Like
are,
co-op.
yes. And so the PSC doesn't regulate, for example, like in North Miami, water and things like that. Yes,
Okay.
there's a few little small ones. Orlando
Mhm.
also has an
In the city of
independent.
Kissimmee.
Mhm.
Um,
But they're predominantly owned. I mean, power generated in the state of Florida is predominantly done by the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities.
so here's something I saw, and I've noticed recently. So you're driving west on the Dolphin as you're approaching, as you pass Lejeune Road, 42nd Avenue, going westbound on the westbound lane. Blue Lagoon, they have these floating solar panels.
Mhm.
I believe our mayor was instrumental in getting that set up. Um, are we going to see more solar panel farms in South Florida, or what do you think is going to happen as we move
Well,
forward and people become more aware?
we're going to have to figure something out with Turkey Point. I mean,
Okay.
clearly, we have a small window to do that. Escambia County, if anybody wants to look at a model, they might want to look at Escambia. Escambia is just about to open up its third giant solar farm. And I call it a farm because it was literally land that was farmed at some point and
Mhm.
purchased by a utility company. And then they put the solar panels up. So that is where a lot of the rate hike is to go purchase this land and install solar panels on these properties to produce and generate power. But with that being said, land is limited in Miami-Dade, as we all know. But we have
Certainly
a
at a premium.
lot of roof lines. And I mean, when was the last time that you stood back and said, "Wow, my roof is sexy looking. I just love it." Unless you put a brand new roof on and you just paid that huge bill, you're going to stand back and say, "Wow, that roof is sexy." But the truth is they're not the most attractive things in the world.
Mhm.
So putting some solar panels on them, in my view, is probably the most pragmatic way to produce energy
Yeah,
versus trying
monetize
to pay.
your ceiling, your roof. Monetize
Exactly.
your roof. Save some
And the
money.
schools. So there's a bill in the state legislature it died. That's the term that we use when basically it didn't pass all of its committees. That was going to do just that, was going to require the state to put money into putting solar panels on
Mhm.
school roofs. And part of that was talking about hurricane preparedness, right? Those are storm shelters.
That they are.
And when the grid goes down, it would be wonderful to have those storm shelters at least powered during the day. But unfortunately, that bill was not supported either, which is quite surprising to me.
And why? I mean, what's going on? I guess the corporate industry is driving this train.
And that one I'm completely stymied by, because I can't really understand why the legislators didn't look at that from a very pragmatic standpoint and say, this is a storm shelter. Our grid system goes down regularly. Let's make sure that we get power to that, at least during the daylight hours.
During, was it Irma? Post Irma, the legislature, and when I was there, the House created a select committee on hurricane preparedness and readiness. And I was fortunate that I was appointed to it, and the current lieutenant governor, and I worked on that. She and I were both representing Dade County, and she was the chair. And I remember having not just superintendents, but leaders from municipal and county government coming to see us specifically about alternatives, because, as you said, hurricane comes through, power goes out, the shelters, they have these generators, they ran out of fuel. We had the problem with the fuel. getting fuel to the areas.
Which isn't the world's safest
yeah, no,
thing
no,
either.
they're like sitting bombs right next to
Right.
those locations. Anyway, I go to the issue at hand is the fact that we were looking for alternatives. And I remember the solar panel, exactly what you're saying, the solar panel grid, expanding it, getting these solar panel platforms that are on wheels that become microgrids, power a lot of properties. But yet here we are so many years later, and we have no advancement in this arena. What can the consumers do to get involved in this topic?
Talk to their legislators.
Okay,
And demand it. We have to stand up and we have to demand it. We have to demand that we want to move forward with this technology. We want to reduce costs. So I would imagine, I don't know this for sure, but the school system must spend an inordinate amount of money on energy in air conditioning those schools in northern parts of Florida, putting heat into those, all of the lighting and everything that goes into that. Those solar panels would not just be there because of a hurricane. They would be there day in and day out, producing energy and reducing the costs in every single school system.
And that's a savings to the taxpayer, you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
At a time that we're struggling, most people are struggling. In Dade County, as I mentioned earlier today, according to the Alice report, for the United Way 2020 addendum, it shows that in Dade County, roughly 60% of the households, and I venture to say it's even more, those are people that are above the federal poverty line, that they're struggling.
Yeah.
They're one paycheck away from disaster. They can't even afford $200 to $400 unexpected hit to their budget.
Yeah, the person wallet squeeze is real.
Yeah, man, it's
very
hurting.
real for renters. I mean, the rent has increased across the state.
Mm-hmm.
Your electric bill went up. Your property insurance too, by the way, is about to go up. So that's an issue as well. It's not getting better. It's getting worse.
It's hurting.
So we have to find ways from a policy perspective to try to bring some sort of help to people.
So I want to shift something. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to shift something because you're a consumer policy advocate. Wrapping my head around that one. I can't thank you enough because there's so many needs that we have to save money and protect us because predators are out there and there's no shortage of them. And the harder the times get, the more they seem to come out. Talking about saving taxpayers' money. At the top of the show, I opened up with this question: does Florida have a voter fraud problem? Can you talk about that? Because the legislature is about to end. They're going into the last week. They will be finalizing all the legislative proposals. They will be enacting law. And one of those desired pieces, governor's priority pieces, are to create a voter fraud investigative police unit. Do we have a fraud problem in the state of Florida with voters?
So I volunteer during elections to work on the polling locations, and there's always going to be some level of fraud. It's impossible as human beings, no matter what we participate in society, always going to be some type of fraud. It's just inherent being part of humans. Okay. But let's look at the scale of it, right? I think that's the key. Is it's constantly a balance, and that's what our state legislators should be doing for us, right? Is balancing it. How much tax dollars and time and energy go into the problem that we have? The research that I've looked at through the Heritage Foundation, which is a giant think tank that collects data from all over the country, is there isn't. So if you go back, and they've been collecting this data for like 20 some odd years, I can't find a single year in the state of Florida that had more than 6 cases of election fraud. In any given year, 6 was the highest. Many years had as low as 2. So let's average it out and say you're going to have maybe 4 or 5 cases on any given year.
Hold on a second. You have 21.4 million people in the state of Florida. We must have about 15 million registered voters.
And you have 5 or 6 bad apples.
How is that a priority? Now I get the fact that we want to ensure, because look, we want to protect against voter fraud.
Right.
What I was about to say is voter fraud is illegal, it's improper, and is no way acceptable. right?
Correct.
And those that commit voter fraud should be prosecuted because you're
And they
trying
are.
to subvert.
And they are through the state attorneys.
Well, that's where I'm going. Whose authority has been? It's been a state attorney.
State
It's been the local
attorneys.
law enforcement, Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Yes,
we
they are
need-
involved.
Do we need another layer of government?
My opinion, no, considering that bill has a $6 million price tag on it. $6 million, which is
And that's
a lot of
year-round,
taxpayer
right?
dollars. Yes, yes. The bill is structured. It's a very loose bill too, though, by
Mhm.
the way. And I believe your past show attendee mentioned that, right? Like they
Yeah.
wanted to maybe narrow down the scope on that, but as written, it's very loose. So what those people will actually be doing when you have such little fraud, I can't imagine that you need to spend, 6 months investigating it. It's pretty quick and easy, open and shut door on those. But let's talk about funding though,
Mhm.
because I think that's one of the key arguments that I have, the fiscal responsibility of it. On the other hand, we had Catherine Fernandez Rundle, our state attorney here in Miami-Dade, the Monroe County state attorney, the Palm Beach County state attorney, Mr. Aaron Berg. Many in law enforcement and the public defender's office have now done 2 press conferences, one in Tallahassee and one here just a couple of days ago in
Mhm.
Miami-Dade, begging and talking about the financial crisis that they have within their own departments.
That means they need more funding.
Yes, it is a funding issue. They have lost dozens now. In Catherine Fernandez Rundle's case, I believe she called out maybe 60 or 70 state attorneys that she has lost. It is the largest one in the state. The public defender, same scenario. I think combined, they said they've lost 100 state attorneys who left and went into private sector work because they could make more money. Wasn't COVID related, meaning I wasn't comfortable. It was because they can go and make more money. So they're paid $50,000, Robert. $50,000 is the starting salary of
Of
somebody.
assistant state attorney.
Or a public defender. They
Okay.
come in at the same. Exactly. I remember that my nephew, who graduated from college 9 years ago, started in private sector work with Progressive Insurance at $62,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was with an undergrad. So now we're talking about people who have a graduate degree, probably come in with some student debt
Attorneys,
associated with that.
JDs.
Yes.
At least $100,000
At
debt.
$50,000. Now, and how can you live in Miami-Dade and pay any student debt? And Lord, if you have to buy a car, I don't know what you're buying to live.
So we have about 2 minutes left. I've been given the warning here. I hear you. My concern is we have other law enforcement agencies, jurisdictions throughout the state that quite capable of handling this problem when it does occur. I myself investigated cases. I know what it is to investigate these cases. I know some of them take a long time, but to create a unit and create another layer of government and to fund it when there's so many other needs at the existing, offices is beyond me. One last thing. We know the state employment services, the state employees, people are having a hard time staying as state employees. They can't afford to work for the state because we know the state is the lowest paying employer generally in government. So we're going to create another agency to appease a whim, if you will, for a non-existent problem. Problem. And then we're going to probably wind up paying them low wages. So we're not fixing the problem at all here. We're just compounding it by putting on another piece of government and a false expectation.
Well, they might not even be able to hire for it.
That might be the case. So Laura, look, what I'd like to do is there's so much to talk about, right? And we certainly just scratching the surface on these issues. I'd like to extend an invite for you to come back and maybe we can do a whole show, 50 minutes on some of these issues, a lot of these issues where we can go more into detail.
Would love to.
And be able to provide the audience a better perspective as to what's going on, how they can better protect themselves, and just be informed of what the scams are. Because they're just outright scams.
Yeah. The more informed our citizenry is, the better off we are. I truly, within my heart, believe that people make good choices when they're well informed. but we have to make sure that they are well informed because they're complicated issues. They're way up in Tallahassee. Everybody knows Tallahassee is very hard to get to. You're living your day, you're every day going to work, and you just need to be able to rely on people who can feed you good information, and you can make an informed decision when you go and vote.
On that note, this has been Robert Asencio sitting down with the lovely Laura Wagner, who's an excellent consumer advocate. I think she's awesome, and I want to have her on. I want to have your team on. I want to learn more. I think we who are consumers deserve as much knowledge as we can get. So on that note, thank you to the Millers and Community News, Andres, Ilian. Thank you so much for being in the production team. We'll talk to you next time. Drop us a line. Let us know what you want us to feature, what topics you want us to talk about. But please let us know how you're feeling about the shows. Thank you.